So I just finished playing Final Fantasy XVI and I need someone to talk to about it. At the time of writing, it's the 10th of July, 2023, a little before 2:30 p.m. I just texted my friend 15 seconds ago and he hasn't answered back. Then I remembered I have a YouTube channel specifically for this kind of thing, so Isaac, this is your fault. Final Fantasy XVI released on June 22nd, 2023, which was a Thursday, which was fucking weird, and is like the billionth installment in the Final Fantasy franchise. First thing I need to get out of the way, I really like this game. Combat is snappy and satisfying, the characters are likable and expertly brought to life by the acting, graphics, and art direction. Active time lore and the expanding lore compendium are the coolest fucking systems ever, and every single game needs them. And the Game of Thrones-esque mature take on the Final Fantasy experience is one I can really get behind. I mean, I know you've always imagined what it would be like for Ifrit to bang Shiva, and now it's canon. I plan to talk about this game more in the future because it serves as a very good reference point for comparison with other Final Fantasy games and other RPGs and action games in general. But for today, fresh in my thoughts after just having watched the post-credits scene, I wanted to tackle one theme in particular, the ultimate sacrifice. But to do that, we're going to need to go on a bit of a journey.
You're going with them tomorrow, aren't you?
I am Joshua's shield. I'm sworn to protect him. He takes too many risks. I only wish I could save him from himself.
I started playing Final Fantasy with 9, which makes me a bit biased, but 9 is hands down my favorite one to date. From there I moved on to 10, 10-2, the 13 saga, which I hated, to 15 or Versus 13 if you're a real one, back down to 7, then 12, then 7 Remake, and now 16. I probably missed one here or there. If you're interested in my rough opinion of these games, I've organized my general thoughts in a handy-dandy tier list. Please note, this tier list is merely a reflection of my thoughts at the current moment, are subject to change, and are not an objective statement on the quality of any given game. So if you disagree, please, kindly, leave me the fuck alone. This doesn't include spin-offs like Crystal Chronicles, all of which I played, including My Life as a King and My Life as a Dark Lord, and no, I've never played 8 and don't really plan to. I never really put it to words before, but every Final Fantasy is about a specific vibe, you know? These stories are anarchistic at their roots, centering around a group of young, naive punks rising up to burn down some fundamentally unjust, destructive, and evil system. Very often, the evil system is layered too, fronted by some human or otherwise mortal figure, but truly run from behind the scenes by some inscrutable, godlike entity which thrives on the suffering, chaos, and turmoil of mortal beings.
By primogenesis shall a new age of reason begin.
So you start off in this inherently unjust system, or just being introduced to it, and as you go along, forging friendships, the occasional romance, and exploring the world on your grand adventure, you begin to uncover the dark, ancient legacy behind the unjust system, and the cosmic machinations keeping the status quo spinning on and on and on. There are games, even in the mainline series, that stray from that general premise, but more or less they follow this framework. Final Fantasy characters don't often offer alternatives to the unjust system. Each game's pacing doesn't really allow for that level of contemplation, unless you want a 30-minute epilogue, which honestly, after 16, I kinda do. In these games, it's really about getting in there, eating the rich, and tearing down the house. Okay, maybe not eating the rich. I mean, half of the characters are royalty or whatever. But the point is that characters tend to hyper-focus on eliminating the evil at the core of the system to the detriment of everything else. They wish to allow the world to live and grow however it will, absent of the influence of whatever malicious third party is pulling the strings. So we really don't get to see what comes after, only that in the end, all is usually well. The world and its people get to breathe free of the plots of gods.
But what makes them think they have the right to use us? To leave us to die when our bodies are spent?
Does a nobleman weep for a broken mug? A torn tunic? Our fate means nothing to them. No, this isn't a battle you can win with words. Believe me, I've tried, but nothing ever gets through. The world is simply not ready to listen. So to hell with talking. If they won't give us a say, we'll decide our fates another way. You can't blame a man for wanting to bring an end to all this, can you?
Final Fantasy XVI differs from the other Final Fantasy games narratively in that it's a lot more mature in its execution. There's blood, there's swearing, there's sex.
Cheer up, you two. Can't think of a safer place in the Empire than a... brothel.
Really? Doesn't seem very private.
The characters are older, in their late 20s as opposed to mid to late teens like the other Final Fantasy games, and as such, the story focuses greater on political intrigue, exploring the financial, sexual, and political motivations of nations which seek to harm others.
Murderer. All of our friends are dead because of you. Do you hear me? They used us as bait! Bait to lure you out of your stinking hole, all because you couldn't just let things be!
For 5 years we fought to secure a better life for our kind. To see that we are treated as equals. Do you not want that?
What we want is to be left alone. Every time you show your faces, it is we who suffer.
The main characters, Clive, Jill, Sid, and the others, plan to overthrow the system, starting with freeing the enslaved class and ending with the destruction of the colossal energy source, thieving the life force from the natural world. Most of the time, in a Final Fantasy game, this anarchistic streak is okay, justified, and very cool. Sometimes it's not. And sometimes it's just a bit of a weird turn that leaves me unsure, a deep sense of longing and dissatisfaction buried in my chest. It's 3:53 now. I've eaten some food and my thoughts are all scrambled. I know I have something to say, but I'm not really sure what or how to say it. So let's begin first with a thesis. I think at certain points, the themes of Final Fantasy XVI get muddled such that the ending, while very beautiful, poignant, and memorable, straight from the focus it feels like the game was building towards. The game's fixation on lone wolf, one-man army gameplay systems and pacing hinders some character relationships and a sense of narrative fulfillment. Furthermore, I think the ending would have been more powerful had it gone in a completely different direction. By ending, I mostly mean everything that happens after the final boss is defeated, but I also, to an extent, mean everything that happens upon starting that last mission. It feels a bit like the game rushes to its completion. That's not to say that it lacks for content. I spent dozens of hours on this game, and some of the late game side quests are really good and fulfilling, but that's kind of the problem. The game spends so much time building up this world with themes of hope, forgiveness, sacrifice, and community, and it gives distinct closure to each of those quests and scenarios. I found myself wishing for that to last forever, for the space to share with these lovable characters to be ever expanding. The story is upfront with what it's doing. It's building to a major sacrifice. Clive, Joshua, and Dion venture forward to fight a god with no exit plan. The scene just before the final battle hit hard. It sticks with me.
Well, behave yourself, Mid.
We'll see.
The evil is oppressive, unyielding, and the hour for sacrifice is quickly approaching. But in my heart, I felt the game would subvert my expectations, that the heroes would find a way to continue giving the gift of themselves to the world. They didn't. Final Fantasy XVI takes place across two continents, Storm and Ash. Magic, born through the world in the form of ether, is collected in massive crystals known as the Mother Crystals. Various nations possess Mother Crystals and mine smaller crystals from them, which are used in the daily operations of the world, freezing food, collecting water, and starting fires. But magic is also distilled in two other forms, bearers and dominants. Bearers are people born with the capacity to use magic, and dominants, of which there are 9, though there used to be more, possess the essence of icons, elemental entities which wield godlike magical power. Dominants can transform into these icons at will and are often used as tools akin to nuclear weapons to raise battlefields and deter opposing nations from waging war.
If you would but take the field, their bellies would be full by nightfall.
If I take the field, so too will Bahamut, and our duel will shake the island to its foundations. Instead of liberating the Dominion, you would doom it to destruction. Unless that is what you desire.
Treatment of dominance varies from nation to nation, from Jill Warwick, who is treated by the Iron Kingdom as a necessary evil, no more worthy of humanity than their hammers and gunpowder.
The Crystalline Orthodox is a backwards faith for a backwards people. In the Iron Kingdom, they teach that dominants are unclean aberrations, born of blackest sin.
To Hugo Kupka, who is granted near unchecked authority and deference as an advisor to the leaders of the Dhalmekian Republic. Treatment of bearers, however, is fairly consistent throughout the world. Bearers are lowly, disgusting creatures, loathed for their gifts and often enslaved, used as battlefield fodder or cogs in the societal machine before dying untimely deaths. Bearers who overuse their magic succumb to a curse which petrifies and ultimately kills them, and dominants who prime, that is, fully transform into their icons, suffer similarly destructive, though somewhat inconsistent side effects.
The curse has spread. Make sure she rests.
The world as a whole suffers too, as ether is drawn from the earth into the crystals and magic permeates the realm. The planet dies. Blight spreads across the land, rendering the land black and uninhabitable.
The Deadlands are aptly named.
I didn't realize they were this close.
No wonder their crops are failing. Light is leaching the ether from the soil, and when the last drop is drained, their fields will turn to this. No plants, no animals, no life.
And no monsters. I suppose that's one small mercy.
Already the game is tackling many themes, and for the most part I think it juggles them pretty well. Climate, classism, slavery, war. Ultimately, it converges at the singular point of community, forgiving and believing in the people around you, regardless of their birth or upbringing, in order to overcome any calamity which might befall the world. Now, I'm not going to do a full play-by-play of the entire story, mainly because I do expect to talk about this game in the future, and honestly, we just kind of vibing right now, you know? Clive is a dominant of the icon Ifrit, but doesn't know it at first. And after the death of his father and the brutal sacking of his duchy at the hands of the Holy Empire of Sambrek, Clive is enslaved. So Clive experiences firsthand the struggles of various classes of people. Even early on, this narrative, along with various gameplay elements, establishes a strong one-man army motif. Clive is taught from beginning to end to bear the weight of the world on his shoulders and his shoulders alone, and continue barreling onward. The main push of the narrative is Clive trekking around the world to destroy the Mother Crystals, ending their apocalyptic draw of the planet's resources. Though they do this for the greater good, each destroyed Mother Crystal goes with great cost to Clive, Clive's friends, and the world in the short term. As such, I absolutely would not have been surprised if the game took a turn a la The Last of Us Part 2 or A Plague Tale Requiem, where one struggle against a hostile world and single-minded dedication to overcoming it leads them to lose themselves and that which they hold dear.
I don't know what's happening to me, Lucas. I feel my mind going.
Yes, because this world hurts. And it keeps hurting. And you want to hurt it back. But it's a fight you cannot win, Amicia.
It was me. I killed him. I killed Joshua. I killed them all. I'm a monster. And I deserve to die. So end it. End it now. Please. Please. Ah! I reckon I can take you, if that's what you want.
This game doesn't take that turn. Clive is a super nice guy, very sweet, patient, sexy as fuck. Clive gets a girlfriend, his childhood friend Jill, who is reunited with him in adulthood, and he is reconnected with his living family. The world is grim and scary, but Clive is absolutely big chillin'. He's a very honorable character, a lot like Ned Stark, in more ways than one, I guess. Aside from this one out-of-character moment where he completely snaps at Joshua.
It's like a dream, the four of us out walking like we used to.
Enjoying this, are you? Gav and the others could be in danger as we speak.
You're right. I'm sorry.
I can't think of many times after accepting his icon that he seems like he's going to succumb to his rage. There's still the threat that the pressure of his burdens might eventually crush him, and that threat never really goes away, but as I said before, the effect of icons on their dominance isn't totally consistent.
But look how far we've come. All that we have here, our friends, the hideaway, are they not cause for joy?
5 years. 5 long years. If I could only command this power I've been granted, we might have achieved so much more. But each time I reach for it, it's like something is holding me back.
Summoning an icon exacts a price not easily paid. Your body knows this only too well. It's merely trying to save you from yourself.
And every burden I cannot bear falls to you.
Clive, for almost the entire game, doesn't suffer any of the same ailments that we see in other characters.
Ah, Clive. You're not where I left you.
Hurt your hand.
I did, aye. With 1,000 little lightning bolts. Can't fling them around the way I used to.
The game orbits emotionally what I feel to be 3 focal points. Clive's relationship with Jill, Clive's relationship with Joshua, and Clive's relationship with humankind. Let's talk about Jill and Josh first. We first meet Jill and Josh in a flashback to the Duchy at the start of the game. Well, technically we meet Jill a little earlier because she's Shiva, and also I guess we meet Joshua earlier too because the game starts off with the Phoenix fight. But anyway, these 3 have an incredibly beautiful friendship. Their chemistry is great, they care about each other, and you can feel the burden of their roles with respect to those around them in nearly every word they speak. You get the sense that despite it all, their bonds carry them through the day-to-day difficulties of living in the Duchy. As mentioned before, just days before a planned assault on the Iron Kingdom, the Duchy is invaded by soldiers from the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Empire of Sambrec. Jill disappears. Edwin, Clive's and Josh's father, is murdered. Clive's mother, Annabella, is seemingly behind it all, and Joshua is seemingly killed as well by this mysterious Ifrit icon. Of course, the icon is Clive, and a large part of the beginning of Clive's journey is being reunited with Jill and coming to terms with the realization that he killed, or nearly killed, his brother Joshua.
It was me. I killed Joshua.
No, that's not true. I know you wouldn't do that.
It's the truth. I changed into him again, not long ago. The second icon of fire. The one responsible.
The reveal that Joshua is still alive is where things get a little weird for me. Joshua is the dominant of the Phoenix, known in all of mythology as the beast of rebirthing flames. So I thought it was going to be revealed that Clive killed Joshua after losing control of his then unknown icon, and Joshua's latent Phoenix abilities brought him back to life, making Joshua effectively immortal. This is backed up by the fact that Joshua is the most physically ill major character that we see throughout the story, but he somehow manages to stay on his feet, engaging in battle, summoning his icon and all.
You're bleeding! I have a tonic which will...
I thank you for your kindness, truly. But I assure you, I will survive. Please, save your medicines for those who need them most.
Joshua is not immortal, and it's stated outright that the Phoenix cannot bring someone back from the dead. This means that Clive almost killed Joshua, but didn't. Joshua was instead saved by Yote, a girl we learn criminally little about, whose duty to the late duchy was to protect the Phoenix icon with her life. Emotionally speaking, this means that Clive spends the majority of his young adulthood seeking revenge on Ifrit's dominant, then, upon realizing he is Ifrit's dominant, coming to terms with the very likely reality that he killed his own brother. He opens up to Jill about this and spends so much time just living with that.
But now I know for certain who I really am. The second icon of fire, who killed my brother and burned this castle to the ground, was me. Ifrit.
Clive.
But when he learns that Joshua is alive suddenly, I don't know, suddenly Clive's life just feels weirdly perfect. Like, he has his childhood friend back who loves him more than anything. He has his brother back who loves him. He's reunited with his dog, his uncle. Nearly everyone from Clive's past inner circle is A-okay. So yeah, you know, big chillin'. Now let's talk about Jill. I really like Jill, and I wish we got to see more of her personal struggle, including what she went through after being captured when the duchy was sacked.
Oh, we destroyed it.
What? Monster! Monster! Do you have any idea what you have done?
I do, Father. I have killed the monster and become an outlaw. May the blessing of the crystals go with you.
I think Jill is a fantastic character, and the fulfillment of her relationship to Clive was very refreshing. Short tangent, anime always does this shit where the romantic tension and chemistry between characters is heavily teased but goes unfulfilled and sometimes not even addressed. Like, fuck that noise. It made me unreasonably happy when Winry got a little head pat at the end of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Anyway, Jill's awesome, and her passion and commitment to Clive is intense, but there are certain points of the story where it feels like they weren't sure what to do with her. Jill's relationship with Clive starts off at like a 7 when they're children. They get separated, reunited 15 years later, and suddenly their relationship jumps to a 10 and stays there. From beginning to end, Jill is completely unyielding in her devotion to Clive and his goals. She only snaps at him once.
Taya's right. Your brother is in no condition to travel. That's all I'll say on the matter.
And while it's very nice just seeing these two be together and enjoy each other's presence,
Molly in the kitchens told me about a place that sells particularly good pies. Thought you might like to share one with me.
I would. Thank you.
And I saw some bread. Big white cobs like the baker back in Rosalith used to make. What do you think? I thought we might get some soup to dip it in. But then I tried a slice of the butcher's dry-cured ham and it was just,
You all right?
Sorry. It's just, you're right. I really do feel like a child again being here with you.
it gets a little bittersweet when you start to see just how little time Clive has to spend with her.
Oh, and Clive, thank you. It was nice just being with you.
Maybe it's just me, but at certain points it even feels like Clive is neglecting her. The biggest shift in their adult relationship comes after Jill gets captured by Barnabas, the dominant of Odin. For the first time in the story, Clive is simply not strong enough to defeat his opponent, so Jill has to overexert herself and use Shiva's power to help Clive escape. Jill gets captured. Everyone mobilizes to save her. Clive gets his ass kicked again, and Jill once more has to push herself to make sure they get out alive.
You're in no fit state.
Probably not, but I can try.
I thought Jill was going to die at this point. She already spent a good part of the story stuck in an infirmary bed, so I was like, oh shit, this is it. Jill's reaching the point of no return. She's going to push herself to the brink and be unable to come back. Instead, we get a surprising and incredibly beautiful scene solidifying Jill's commitment to Clive.
And I promise you, Clive, that I will be there, no matter what you must become.
I know. I never thought a smell could bring me so much joy.
And we get a big, sloppy kiss. As I said, these two have never faltered in their love for each other. Jill was 100% on board from the jump, so their relationship doesn't shift much here, but what does get solidified here, I think I don't like it.
And I know you're not about to change. So I'm going to help you. To give you what you need to protect us all.
Jill. Are you sure? If this is what you want, then...
This scene cements Clive's lone wolf, one-man army philosophy and sets Jill up to become Clive's widow. Jill, in this scene, is effectively saying to Clive, I am no longer able to keep up with you, so I'm giving you my power so you can fight for both of us. And after this point, Jill gets sidelined so hard.
Only Joshua and I will be going. And a scout. Preferably a good one. Gav, do you know of any?
You bet your ass I do.
Jill, the Enterprise will appear a tempting target for royalists and pirates alike. You're to stop anyone boarding.
Don't worry. I'll keep the ship and her crew safe. You'll be needing passage home, after all.
The story still goes out of its way to let her in on the goings-on of the apparently more important characters, and her commitment to Clive is still one of the emotional cores of the work, but Jill has absolutely nothing to do for the remainder of the narrative. It's even the point of the final side quest you get for her that she feels useless for not being able to transform into Shiva anymore. So Clive, not even noticing this, Joshua notices it first, takes Jill out on a date for once.
Thank you, Clive. For this, the flowers, for everything. It's exactly what I needed. You are my treasure.
Like, I don't doubt that Clive loves Jill, but I really think neglect is the best word for how he treats her sometimes. So with that, we revisit the scene just before the final battle. Dion, dominant of Bahamut, Joshua, and Clive are about to leave to fight and kill Ultima, a god bent on destroying the world to create a new one free of the Blight. It's a beautiful, heart-wrenching scene, and from this moment to the after credits, I just kept thinking, poor Jill.
If that is all?
Not quite. Jill.
It's time, isn't it?
It is.
She suffered so much and gave up everything for this man, only to have to sit there and impotently watch as he soars off to his ultimate demise with Joshua and some fuck she barely knows. Dion's actually fantastic. I stand for Dion. I just like to add a little textual fluff here and there. The third emotional locus of the narrative is Clive's relationship to humanity, by which I mean his effect on the political climate of the world. At first, his relationship is hostile, antagonistic. He's a slave, he's an outcast, he's an outlaw. And over time, especially through some of the fantastic late game side quests, you get the firm sense that Clive has united the world and that the world is raising him up. The final battle specifically makes a big point of telling us that the reason Clive can win, the reason Clive can destroy a god, is because the bonds that one forges makes beings more powerful together than they ever could be alone.
Anguish, pain, suffering. You have known none of these, but we have. So we know what they grant. They bring us together, and that makes us strong.
Clive is victorious in the end because his friends are standing beside him. But are they? Where is Jill, and Midodal, and Gav, and Tarya? I can't help but be reminded of how little time I got to spend with some of these guys.
Do you know, I think this is the very first time we've been out on an errand together.
I think you might be right.
In all the years since you and that scowl of yours first appeared, you haven't invited me out once. For shame.
Clive says he's strong because his friends are with him.
I carry with me the hopes and dreams of my brothers, my sisters. And it is they who will give me the strength to end your reign.
But I can't help but feel that that is a total fucking lie. It's 8:40 p.m. I'm thirsty and a little horny and still very much stuck in my feels over this very moving and otherwise amazing experience. I'd like to revisit my thesis. At certain points, the themes of Final Fantasy XVI get muddled, such that the ending, while very beautiful, poignant, and memorable, stray from the focus it feels like the game was building toward. The game's fixation on the lone wolf, one-man army gameplay systems and pacing hinder some character relationships and sense of narrative fulfillment. Furthermore, I think the ending would have been more powerful had it gone in a completely different direction. Now's a good chance to elaborate. I am down with the super anime message that bonds and relationships and friendships and family are what make people stronger than themselves. A community, a society is greater than the sum of its parts. And it starts to feel in the end that Clive has gotten this societal machine moving in such a way that no one needs to suffer to keep it going. I get what the game was setting up. Clive becomes a Christ-like figure throughout the game, one blessed with the extraordinary ability to take the powers of other dominants and wield them himself.
Nigh limitless power that is at once acutely limited. I wield fire, and only fire.
And I only ice. 8 wardens for 8 elements. But you, Clive...
You are different. You're special. Your abilities begin with the flames of Ifrit. But they do not end there. The fact Ifrit can even exist goes against everything we thought we knew of dominance. Perhaps Ultima has been waiting for one such as you, whose potential is truly limitless.
He can't transform into other icons, but the essences of the icons are taken from their respective dominants and carried by Clive in perpetuity. They are literally passing their burdens onto him. And in a figurative sense, the same happens with the various side characters we meet throughout the story. When trouble arises, Clive is there to step in and set things right. Cleverly, some of the final side quests have Clive play less of a role in their conclusions than you would expect, which makes it feel like the world is finally starting to stand on its own 2 feet. Clive is no longer really necessary to fix everything. But there's still the giant fuck off crystal
hanging over the horizon
that needs to be dealt with. So the story goes down a path I don't really understand. Dion, Clive, and Joshua fly off to fight God, and the battle initially isn't going well. Dion sacrifices himself to protect Joshua and Clive. Joshua, who had been holding back an aspect of Ultima, finally has that aspect taken from him, and just before dying, gives the essence of the Phoenix to Clive. Clive thoroughly kicks Ultima's ass, takes Ultima's essence for some weird reason, has a final touching moment with Joshua, destroys the final Mother Crystal, then washes up on the shore and dies, succumbing to petrification from the crystal's curse.
It seems Ultima's power was too great for this vessel all along.
Clive's death comes from the deep, dark pits of complete nowhere. So, quick edit/disclaimer. So after a drunken conversation with Isaac from earlier, hi Isaac, he helped me realize that there is a degree of ambiguity to the ending of the game. We don't specifically see Clive die. He doesn't like vanish into the ether or become completely corrupted with the crystal's curse. So there is some ambiguity there as to an interpretation of like maybe Clive did survive, maybe he went on. If the events of the game were to continue, Clive and Jill would be reunited or someone would find him, etc., etc. Now I'm still choosing to read the ending as Clive dies, that he met his ultimate end. And my 2 pieces of evidence are, just the quick acceleration of the curse. Like he suffered no symptoms and then suddenly his entire hand is frozen. And then there is just the fact that no one knows where he is at all. But I do want to acknowledge that there is that ambiguity there, to the point that, while I was watching the credits the first time through and waiting for a possible epilogue sequence, which there is, but it's not what I was expecting. I was expecting the epilogue to be Jill coming to the beach and finding Clive, or someone stumbling across Clive on the beach and finding him there, either dead or alive, or something along the lines of Clive standing back up and kind of stumbling away, and then a fade to black, and then we can sort of assume that he makes his way back there. But given the evidence that the game gives me, I'm reading it as Clive doesn't survive, though I did want to acknowledge that there is that ambiguity there. I don't think it changes a lot of my criticisms at all. In fact, I think one of my other criticisms stands even stronger now, is that I wish we had a longer, more solid epilogue. And something that explained more where the party members were, unless they just wanted to keep it open. But yeah, I wanted to acknowledge that ambiguity, and still say that I am reading it as Clive dies, that Clive, Joshua, and Dion all die and meet their ultimate ends there. It will definitely affect the way you respond to this video and to my critiques if you're under the assumption that Clive doesn't die. So I wanted to acknowledge that. I wanted to put that out there. I don't think a lot of my other criticisms change, but still wanted to acknowledge that. Back to the video. Thank you, Isaac, for making this video 3 minutes longer. Love you. Just the realization at the 11th hour that, Ultima's power is too great for me to possess. I have no idea why he took Ultima's essence or why he narratively had to die, but this final sequence frustrates me on a deeper level. The framing shifts back to Jill, who once more only gets to cry after all is said and done. And it took me a moment of sitting with this to realize just how lonely this entire final sequence is. Clive says over and over how his friends are with him and how they make him strong, but here he is, far from home, fighting a god by himself in a place he doesn't know and has no connection to. Dion, also apart from his lover, his former teacher, and anyone who might care about him, like the little girl that nursed him, is dead. Joshua, who suffered so long to be reunited with Clive, is dead. Yote is not here, Jill is not here, Clive is thoroughly alone. Clive's appeal to Ultima, calling out Ultima's hubristic yearning to save himself at the cost of everything else, rings hollow. At some angles, it even feels hypocritical.
You're still that same boy I grew up with. Always so eager to save everyone around you, and yet always so low. Because you failed to realize the one thing that needed saving most of all. You, Clive. You. You never once took the time to save yourself.
I am Joshua's shield. I'm sworn to protect him. He takes too many risks. I only wish I could save him from himself.
Clive, you...
Myself. I think I might be beyond saving.
No one is beyond saving, provided they want to be saved.
After Jill is saved, she and Clive have their big, sloppy lovemaking scene, and she gifts Clive her power. I can't keep up with you, etc., etc. Clive goes off with Joshua to defeat Barnabas, and this is what plays out.
You took her icon, didn't you?
Yes, I did. She understood.
Oh, she understood. Understood that you decided to save the world all on your own, and that you'd die without her power. How dare you make her choose? You knew damn well she'd never refuse you. But I will. You can't keep pushing us away, Clive. The world is ours to save, not yours.
I used my gift because I thought it was the right thing to do.
And you truly believe this will save you? Will save us all?
I do.
Then so be it. Just don't forget, you're not alone.
So this was sudden, but I think I really liked this moment. It assuaged my fear that the narrative would continue down this one-man army path. This is Joshua reprimanding Clive, telling Clive that Jill was wrong. She should not have given him her powers. She should not allow Clive to dive into the abyss alone. But fast forward a few hours and, well, here we are. Here's where I find myself with a bit of a chicken and egg conundrum. This one-man army fixation is present in both the narrative and the gameplay. So let's talk about the gameplay real quick. Clive's party members do not matter in-game at all, and they're implemented in a very peculiar way. The party members rarely speak out in the field and move entirely automatically in battle, so there were many times when I would forget I was even with anyone until I swung the camera around or opened the menu to double check. You get guest party members, which the game explains are temporary. I don't know if I'm missing something, but like all the party members felt like guest party members. There's no point, even at the end of the game, where you get a full party or get to switch people in and out or check and min-max their gear. There are no party finishing moves like Persona or even Final Fantasy XV. They don't do enough damage or have any special effects that makes them worth thinking about, so you can't rely on them to swing the tide of any given fight either. They also don't show up during side quests because you're allowed to tackle these quests at various points in the narrative when certain party members may or may not be there. That made it particularly weird when suddenly, at the end of the game, Joshua starts remarking on what's happening during certain side quests. Like, he doesn't show up in the cutscenes, but after the cutscene is over, he'll say something like,
"They seek the same salvation Barnabas did. At least the third chair still lives. Let's go and find him."
I don't think that happens with any other characters in the game, unless I missed something. This isn't Dragon Age or Persona. You can have conversations with various people in your base throughout the story, but you can't have conversations with party members. Except, and this is super weird, at the very end of the game when suddenly you can have conversations with party members, along with everyone else. And even stranger, Jill has the least to say to Clive. Dion, despite being a dominant and the most party member looking ass motherfucker you've ever seen, never actually becomes a party member. And Jill and Joshua don't remain in your party permanently until you complete 2 super late game side quests for them, which is even stranger because at that point, Joshua is already in your party until the final mission anyway, and because I saved Jill's quest for last, by that time I didn't really have much else to fight. I would have loved more meaningful party members, both for battles and quiet time between quests. These characters are fantastic. I really like them. So more time to spend with them and adventure, more quips about our battles, more conversations, more cutscenes, more interaction would have made this a far fuller experience. So which came first? Is the one-man army gameplay the reason the narrative falls down this incredibly lonely hole, or is the one-man army narrative the reason the gameplay is so singularly Clive focused? I'm not sure, and I don't have enough evidence to lean either way, but this disconnect between the game telling me about the strength of Clive's relationships and Clive's lonely, messianic stumble through the world is at the core of why the ending deeply frustrates me.
So absorbed was he in his own desires, so driven by his own will alone, that he shunned the one thing that could have made him truly powerful. Faith. The same faith people now place in you. Faith that you will fulfill their dream, Sid's dream, of creating a better world for us. Faith that you will follow in Father's footsteps and save those who need saving most. Faith that you will answer Jill's plea to save yourself.
I feel very strongly that the ending to the game would have been even more powerful if Clive were allowed to live, if he were allowed to finally enjoy the fruits of his efforts and look out on a world he helped to build up, a world that Sid, his mentor effectively, never got to see. I was resigned to the idea of Joshua dying. Joshua had already died once effectively and was living on borrowed time for the entirety of the game. But Joshua, Clive, and Dion dying apart from their loved ones, with not a single one of them remaining to even tell the story of their triumph, just feels really cold. Hell, I'll take it a little further. Let's say someone major had to die, no matter what. I would have even been fine if Jill died at this point, because you know what? That would at least have meant that she was there. For her to be so far away from the person she loves most and who has given her the strength to keep going, to not even know what became of him in the end, to be left behind only able to look to the stars and cry, that just sucks. Poor Jill. Something about the ending just feels kind of rushed and unsatisfying, like Ultima's just sitting up there. It felt to me like there was a main quest missing between the final battle and the previous quest. This isn't me saying the game was unfinished, it's got plenty of stuff to do, but like the rush to fight Ultima feels off. Like Dion, right? He loses the ability to prime into Bahamut after Clive takes Bahamut's essence. The same happens with Jill and all the other dominants. But Clive mentions that some dominants can still prime afterwards, though they may lose their sense of self.
But their icons no longer submitted to their will.
Then mine will have to be stronger. That you both might save your strength for the battle to come.
You don't have to do this.
If you do, there's a chance you might lose all you have left.
And what have I but regret?
We see this happen with Benedicta, and we see this happen with Hugo Kupka. So I expected some quest to work with Dion so he learns to prime again while still retaining his senses. I thought this is when he might become an official party member. Instead, he just primes with no problem and is completely in control the entire time. Then there's the fact that Joshua, Clive, and Dion are completely unmatched against Ultima until suddenly Clive gets Joshua's power and thoroughly manhandles Ultima afterward. I still don't know why he takes Ultima's power, and just the realization that Ultima's power is too much for him and corrupts his body after he has shown no sign of sickness or corruption up until this point feels abrupt and weird. In the epilogue, which presumably takes place many, many years after the events at the final Mother Crystal, the story of Final Fantasy is reduced to a mere fairy tale. Magic and its history is among the faintest of memories, and honestly it feels a little bit like the ending to Game of Thrones now that I think about it. And that just feels wrong, not just because it reminds me of Game of Thrones, but if a single one of them, Clive, Dion, or Joshua, had made it back, they could have told the story themselves. And I'm not sure if the game is suggesting that Joshua did survive, given Clive heals Joshua's wound and Joshua's name is on the book, but I don't know. It's possible that the kid's game and the book don't go into detail about what happened at the Crystal. Whatever the case, and however this came about, this ending made me miss having party members. It made me miss the sense of growing your inner circle and leaning back on them until the very end against impossible odds. Final Fantasy IX follows Zidane, Garnet, Vivi, and other wacky characters as they embark on a coming-of-age journey across the sprawling world of Gaia. Despite its lower content rating, the game touches on similar themes to Final Fantasy XVI of war, death, race, love, betrayal. During Disc 3, after arriving on Gaia's twin planet, Terra, Zidane and his friends uncover a race of cloned beings who exist like automatons to look identical to Zidane with tails and blonde hair. Zidane then meets Garland, the leader of Terra and the creator of these beings he calls genomes. Garland explains that he created Zidane to sow chaos in Gaia and accelerate the process of transferring the souls of Gaia's dead to Terra's genomes. But Gaia is Zidane's home. He's lived there for as long as he can remember. He was cast from Terra to ultimately destroy Gaia, but wound up building relationships there, Goku style. And now he and the player want nothing more than to protect Gaia. Zidane tries to attack Garland on his own, but fails and gets captured. Aiko and Vivi come to Zidane's rescue, but Zidane, feeling powerless, doubting himself, his purpose, his existence, his strength, pushes them away. He doesn't wish to become Garland's puppet and destroy those he holds dear. In his emotional turmoil, he lashes out, flinging insults while retreating into himself. What follows is an incredibly memorable sequence accentuated by the theme "You're Not Alone," which plays throughout. Zidane stumbles through Garland's dungeon and is set upon by vicious monsters, but when things appear toughest, the various party members appear, one after the other, to lend a helping hand. This culminates in Zidane being saved and confronted by his love interest Garnet, who kicks him out of his slump, helps restore his perspective, and even playfully ribs him a bit for his brash behavior. What's coolest about this gameplay sequence is the gameplay largely speaks for itself. These battles aren't easy, at least for the level my save game was at, and the battle system is fundamentally built around having more than one person on your side. You can skip turns, heal multiple party members, defend party members, and execute combos like sword magic. You can feel the tension of a difficult fight being lifted somewhat as your party members arrive to help you. This is the moment where Final Fantasy IX reinforces that Zidane is not a one-man army. Despite his special place in the world and his bullheadedness, it's those around him that make him who he is, that make him powerful. Final Fantasy XVI approaches that you're not alone moment, but on its most pivotal axis, completely buckles. This moment, when Clive and Joshua are working through a castle in the Kingdom of Waloed and get overrun by ether-possessed creatures known as the Kashik, I thought this would be the moment that the full party finally comes together.
Stand back, Joshua. I'm summoning Ifrit.
Stop it, Clive. You mustn't. We still have a long way to go. If you tap your strength here, you'll have none left to destroy the heart.
Then you'd rather die? Jill!
This, I thought, was the "you're not alone" moment. Instead, Clive and Joshua get transported to an alternate fucking realm for them to battle Ultima away from everyone else. Once more, Jill is panicked, not knowing where the hell Clive even is. Joshua and Clive take care of things, then get transported back. So it feels like the "you're not alone" moment is supposed to come from Joshua, right? Joshua gifts Clive the Phoenix Feather, reinforcing that he's always with Clive. Joshua pulls Clive from a dreamlike stupor induced by Ultima. Joshua saves Clive from Ultima in the first place. Joshua berates Clive for taking the power of Jill's icon, but at the end of it all, Joshua isn't there. He gifts the Phoenix to Clive and firmly sets the weight of the world back on Clive's shoulders. Clive is left alone to fight and die and leaves no trace of himself behind for those who love him to even put him to rest. Looking through the arcade mode, I realized that nearly every major battle of the story is like this. Clive is fighting alone, without any party members at all. And with Ultima, he doesn't even have his dog beside him. It's the gameplay and narrative reinforcing time and again that no, you are alone. And the one who loves you most, who would hold back a raging tide just to be beside you, she doesn't even get to bear witness to your final moments. No one does. Clive dies alone, on a beach, in the dark, unseen, unheard. 1:57 a.m. Tired. Wondering how to close this out. Maybe I'm overreacting? Did I just want a happy ending? I don't think I needed a happy ending. Done incorrectly, it can feel forced and undeserved, and it's something I'm constantly worried about in my own writing. Is this conclusion justified by the story, the good things and the bad? We get these big heroic sacrifices in plenty of media. The noble protagonist gives themselves to ensure that the future generation lives on. Final Fantasy IX even seems to go along that path a little bit, where Zidane goes back into the fire to save Kuja even after all his friends have made it out safely. They say their goodbyes, knowing they won't be able to change his mind once it's set. And it seems like Zidane is gone for good. We get a lengthy series of epilogue vignettes showing how the party moves on in Zidane's absence in the years that follow. But Just before the curtain closes, Zidane returns to Alexandria. He returns to Garnet, and the two are reunited. I really like the ending of Final Fantasy IX. It's unambiguously nice, touching. Garnet makes the clear choice then that her memories and adventures with Zidane and with her friends in general mean more to her than her royal legacy. That moment bookends the Shakespearean love story, which is the through line of Final Fantasy IX's narrative. It's happy. Not every story warrants that. I think Final Fantasy XVI did. A moment of peace for Clive and Jill to appreciate the world they helped build together. For Dion to accept that the atrocity his icon caused will not forever define his relationship to the world. For everyone to accept that pushing yourself to the brink, as Cid had done, is not the only way to effect meaningful change in the world.
But I beg you, my lord, do not give too much of yourself for the sake of others. We could not afford to lose you.
I'll keep that in mind.
For the story to fulfill its promise that friendship holds within it the power to slay a god. But it's not because I wanted a happy ending. If there had to be a noble, heroic sacrifice, an Arthur Morgan, a Tony Stark, a Hugo de Rune, which I'm still a little iffy about, then it makes perfect sense to me for that character to be Joshua, who, as I mentioned before, already basically died once, is sick and dying throughout the game, and would give himself, the fires of the Phoenix, to help Dion and Clive live the lives the three of them were denied.
Joshua, I was just tired. The Phoenix's flames are a gift. I mustn't waste them.
It isn't a waste. My shields look after me. Why shouldn't I?
That's why.
Joshua would make the shift to become Clive's shield, returning the sacrifice Clive has shown him their entire lives. Hell, I'd even really like if Clive returned home with symptoms of the curse. At least then he has his day, but it's still bittersweet. I can't help but feel like I'm wrong about this. Like I'm missing some crucial detail that justifies it all. Some key narrative thread that required Joshua, Dion, and Clive to perish in the final battle, leaving everyone else behind and in the dark. But it just doesn't feel right. Joshua, albeit justifiably, reneges on his assurance to help Clive shoulder the burden. Clive completely and single-handedly claps Ultima's cheeks. Clive takes Ultima's power for no reason. Clive suddenly realizes he can't contain Ultima's power. Clive succumbs to the curse, which he'd shown no symptoms of up until that point. But in the end, the main thing that makes me so annoyed about this ending is the loneliness of it all. It's the fact that Dion, Clive, and Joshua went there alone in the first place. No friends by their side to see them through or witness their end. Reduced to nothing but distant memories in the cold and foreign hollow of a crystal. I want to reiterate that I really, really like Final Fantasy XVI. It's right up there with Remake as one of my favorite Final Fantasy experiences in recent memory. I'm not actually sure which one I like more. The ending sort of sways me in one direction over the other. The ending just left me feeling really dissatisfied and cold. And I think the Lone Wolf one-man army game systems and narrative pacing are what got us here. I miss having meaningful party members, and I kept waiting for that moment for the game to open up and allow me to have conversations with my party and swap them in and out, but it never came. I feel like if Final Fantasy XVI broadened its scope, made Clive less OP, and allowed him and the world to breathe a little, we would have arrived at a more satisfying conclusion. I wanted to see Yote fight and learn more about her.
And since the day I left Rosaria, Yote has been my constant companion and protector. Without her sword, I would not have survived my journey across the realm.
I wanted to speak to Midadal and Byron more. I wanted to adventure around with Dion. I wanted Joshua and Clive to have a conversation about their awful mother. Maybe I missed something, but after she dies, they don't really talk about it, which is a little weird. I know Clive hated her and had there was no love lost there, but it just feels weird that they never actually spoke about it. I wanted to hear Jill and Josh have conversations out in the world. I wanted desperately for that scene where Clive just sits and rests. Maybe lies down for a little bit on that shoddy ass bed of his. But the game feels like it's constantly rushing from major event to major event in both its narrative and fairly linear game design, which solidified early on that Clive was never going to get to enjoy the fruits of his labor. My favorite moments were the intimate ones with Clive and Jill or the other characters, especially the ending cutscenes for the final side quests. I feel like they sort of held up emotionally where the ending didn't. But they're pretty short-lived, and as I mentioned, even when Clive and Jill make love, it's still couched in this philosophy of desperation, where Jill knows he'll have to eventually leave her and painfully tries to be okay with that. And I just feel really bad for her.
And thus did our journey end.
I've been sitting with these feelings for a full day now. The script is 7,000 words. I just needed to get this off my chest. Now I've got to edit this fucking shit. This isn't even the video I was supposed to be working on. Bye now. See ya.